Minister, talking about air travel bubbles, demand will very likely exceed the supply given the high level of interest.
For Singapore, Hong Kong?
Yes.
Very likely. Very likely.
How will MOT decide who gets to travel? And with regard to fares, will you want to sort of work with SIA to help set it if the whole objective is to promote tourism?
No government departments or ministry have the powers to decide who to travel when we open up a bubble. So we're not centrally planned economy. So I think it's no different from when there's a BTS concert or when there is something really popular, people will queue up and first come, first serve. I am sure the airlines, because I think more than one airline is involved, airlines will, I believe they will be responsible and price accordingly, which means if you price accordingly, chances are demand will outstrip supply. In which case, first come, first serve. But don't rush. I'm sure we will have more opening and more air bubbles.
Might you be persuaded to tell us how many more air bubbles by the end of this year or perhaps the first half of next year?
I can't promise because it's not decided by us alone. We need to persuade our partners to also get into the same frame of mind as us, that it is possible to stay safe and yet open. And I think not every country, not every people and society still have that mindset and the frame of mind. But so it's very important that Singapore, Hong Kong can demonstrate that. Then I think we'll open up more minds, open up more air bubbles.
Can we just speak a bit about Singapore, Malaysia? There's a very high level of interest in what's happening between Singapore and Malaysia. We've had the PCA agreement between the two countries. Given the COVID-19 situation in Malaysia, are we reviewing that arrangement with Malaysia? When can Singaporeans expect the border to open?
PCA is largely MFA, MTI handling it. But if I may speak about aviation with Malaysia, this is one sector that I think it is the busiest air corridor, air sector in the world. Very frequent flights to and fro. So I would really like to have an air bubble with Malaysia. But as of now, the cases in Malaysia is up quite high. So I think we have to wait and see. We do, as I mentioned, the prerequisite must be, the risk profile must be similar or better than us. But we'll wait. I hope. We do know, and our healthcare officials' assessment is that Malaysia takes the virus control very seriously. And so I certainly hope they will succeed in suppressing this current round of spikes.
Currently, the testing being done at the borders is the PCR testing, which is the gold standard, of course. But are you looking to also introduce other forms of testing, whether it's the breathalyzer, for example, or the rapid antigen tests, which has been rolled out at other?
So we take a practical approach. Gold standard, but what we really need in definition of gold should be sensitivity. So long as it is high enough in terms of sensitivity, it works. So it could be antigen, it could be saliva-based test, which is a different way of extracting samples. At some point, for safer countries, could be breathalyzer. A breathalyzer, I do not think it will achieve the same sensitivity as PCR or antigen. I doubt. It may, I hope it will. But so if it's not as high, if it can reach 95%, for example, it is actually quite a useful test for countries that are actually quite safe. Because for countries which are safe, it's already very unlikely that travelers have COVID-19. So this is just an added precaution, and the breathalyzer test may well do the job.
So it is possible that at some point, travelers may be able to opt for the breathalyzer test instead of having to do a PCR?
We have to think through the operation, but I would say not all, probably those from safer countries. That's possible. Early days. But I think what you will see is that there are different kinds of tests, different sensitivity and specificity. So they are useful for different contexts and use cases. So we will want to deploy them to their best potential. So you are starting to see antigen tests being deployed for the MICE event, for example. So I think you will see more tests being deployed for different purposes.
What are some of the steps that have and will be taken in the wake of the 2 cases that were discovered at Terminal 3 recently?
Oh, we took the 2 cases very seriously. Many of us at MOT jumped when we heard about it. So as it turns out, these 2 staff, they are involved in interacting quite closely with passengers. So they wore gloves, masks, as well as shields. I think that's not enough. So we're going to tighten up the process. Number 1, for this group of workers that come into close contact with passengers, they should don full PPE now. Secondly, CAG will step up the frequency of cleaning and disinfection. And thirdly, very importantly, is all the airside workers will be put on an RRT, routine regular testing, or is it regular routine testing, similar to frontline workers, so every 14 days. So as a start, we did, MOH did a full sweep of the workers that come into close contact with passengers. So far, we tested about 2,500 of them, all of whom are negative. So another 1,000 plus to go. From here, we'll do a regular 14-day test cycle. We got to take this very seriously, and we've done it before, because when we were dealing with spreading of the virus in the dorms and in Expo, we do have workers who got infected. But very quickly, we went on the tighter regime, took the necessary precautions, and we saw the last of those infections. We have to do the same thing in Changi now.
Right.
Yeah.
Minister, there are plans to set up a COVID-19 lab at Changi Airport.
Yes.
Can you give us an update on that? What sort of numbers, what sort of capacity are we talking about?
Right now, we have 10,000, but using labs elsewhere in Singapore. And with some short notice, Changi can more or less double it to 20,000, which is more than enough to cater to our needs now, given that travel volume is so low. But to have a dedicated lab at Changi, I think it shortened the process. Yeah, and you don't have to transfer or transport the samples from Changi to the lab, which saves a lot of time. We are using the Resolute 2.0 developed by DSO. So that Resolute 2.0 shortens the time for testing from 2.5 hours to 1.5 hours. So every minute counts in terms of airport operations. So that's why we are setting it up. We hope that the lab can be up early next year, within the first quarter.
So when will Singaporeans get to travel for leisure then? And what do you think this arrangement could be like?
Well, when Hong Kong bubbles start, I'm sure some Singaporeans will fly out. But I think most of us should temper our expectations. The world is still stricken with this virus. And so aviation is still paralyzed by and large. We are just starting to move that one limb of the body of Singapore-Hong Kong air travel bubble. We're still quite a long way away from reviving leisure travel. So we have to be patient. We have to conquer this. Yeah.
So as far as leisure travel is concerned, do you think end of next year might be a more reasonable time frame for people to expect to return to leisure?
Well, every year you add, it becomes more reasonable. Yeah, I do know that by end of next year, definitely several vaccines will be around. Question is how well they work, yeah, and how accessible they are. If they are, I do believe some leisure travel and part of aviation can be revived.